The black caravels of old Volantis slipped beneath the horizon, their raked sails shrinking to cinder-colored strokes against a glaze of dying sun. On the aft castle of the Misericorde, Daenerys Stormborn stood alone, robes snapping like tattered pennons in the brine-sweet wind, and watched the world she'd known fall away into a wash of red-gold memory. The hull beneath her feet groaned with every swell, yet the sound steadied her. It was the promise of motion, of distance, of the untried road. Every lurch was another league placed between herself and the salted bones of her past. She had not wept when the coast of Slaver's Bay vanished. Tears were for stillness, and stillness for the girl she had been. Now the dragon's eggs lay swaddled in black sailcloth in a cedar chest beside her bed, cradled like embers in a grate. The sailors whispered of them in fearful Valyrian, Baida, the unburnt stones. She kept their fear close, savoring how it parted before her like gauze whenever she walked the narrow passages of the ship. Fear was an armor she had never worn before. To fit, night bled across the eastern sea in slow gradients, the sky green glass by increments, then violet, then star-spiked onyx. Lanterns winked into life along the deck rails, flickering fists of saffron light that painted the sailors' faces in bruised hues. Daenerys descended the companionway to her cabin, closing the hatch behind her on a murmur of gull cries and creaking spars. She unwrapped one egg, the black and scarlet one, and pressed her brow to its chill shell. In torch glow, the scales drank the light until they seemed to pulse with a secret heat. "Kalaka," she whispered, voice small in that heaving chamber. "Little dragon." She imagined its heart fluttering in endless darkness, waiting for a sun that had yet to dawn. Outside, waves hammered the hull. The Misericorde plowed east for 9 more days, past ghost lights that danced on the water some said were the lingering souls of nuggers slaughtered krakens, past shapes like broken towers jutting from shoals where empires had drowned. Lonely constellations turned overhead, and when the moon grew thin, a second-born mate hanged himself from the mizzen for fear of what waited where maps ended. His body swung for a watch before the bosun cut him down with a curse and a prayer, the rope humming like a bowstring as it gave. On the 10th dawn, an oily mist rose, thick and viscous as breath on glass. Above it, the sun became a dull copper coin. "We come to the river Ash," muttered Jogo, who had sailed once with a Sarnori slaver to these margins. "South of Eve, the water drinks light." The sailors muffled their bells. Even the drums that marked the watches fell silent. Silence bred silence, until Daenerys felt it settling on her shoulders like a cloak spun from cobweb and smoke. The river was not water, but a slow, glutted vein of something darker. Where the bow plowed through it, lurching eddies glimmered faintly green. Dead pelicans floated by, necks twisted, eyes pearl white, as if some unseen knife had bled not their flesh but their color. Shadows lingered without sources. When the Misericorde's lanterns swung, their light seemed to recoil from the river's sheen, fleeing inward to huddle about the masts. Sailors gnawed cloves and spat into the wind to ward off the rot. At dusk, a pale city surfaced from the haze. Asshai by the shadow, older than ruin, built in angles that hurt to follow, its cyclopean walls crusted with obsidian and jet, its windows dark as if the buildings themselves drank starlight. No pennants flew, no voices called, yet hundreds of lamps burned in niches along the piers, blue flames that made the water look deeper than the sky. The Misericorde moored in silence. Daenerys descended the gangplank with Jorah Mormont at her shoulder, his long sword hidden but close. They passed between statues of faceless kings wrought from fused black glass. Each step rang like a judge's gavel against the basalt pavement. Far within the city, somewhere beyond the crooked palaces and shuttered bazaars, a low horn sounded, a single mournful note that vibrated the very air. Jorah's hand fell to his hilt. "They welcome us," he muttered. "Or measure us," she replied. At a cusp where 3 streets met, a figure awaited, swathed head to toe in lacquer-black silks pinned by silver bones, eyes lambent as coals through the slits of an obsidian mask. The stranger bowed, palms upturned in the Asshai manner, revealing hands scarred by little circular burns, incense scars, markers of the priesthood. "Mother of dragons," a voice rasped. Neither man nor woman, echoing inside the mask. The Ashen Way salutes the blood of Valyria. The dragons are not yet born, she answered in flawless high Valyrian, though her pulse quickened at the title. And my blood is nothing without their fire. The stranger's head tilted, listening. Then let us find Tinder. They led her through labyrinthine alleys where Shadowbinders sold glass eels that still remembered the shapes of men. Past doorways wreathed in salt and mager pepper to keep the deeper shadows at bay. A market square spread beneath a petrified tree whose branches curved like antlers of polished bone. Beneath it, black candles burned with tongues of violet flame, filling the air with a musk of wolfsbane and polished iron. There, the masked stranger bartered the hide of a Bengal tiger, pawned years before by a Lycene envoy, for a vial of smoking water said to freeze flesh in midsummer. Daenerys watched every trade with silent fascination, memorizing the dance of coin and whisper, the subtle gestures of acceptance and refusal. Power spoke many dialects. She must learn them all. At last they came to an amphitheater carved into the living rock of what might have once been a mountain. Ranks of braziers lit the arena, bronze throats spouting green-gold fire that reeked of brimstone. Cloaked figures filled the terraces, dozens, perhaps hundreds, each wearing a different mask. Eagles of ruby glass, ibex horn inlaid with tin, a blank sheet of river-polished jade. Yet every mask bore those same incense scars across the palms. Shadowbinders. She could feel their eyes pressing against her skin, a flock of unseen crows. In the center of the arena stood a stone dais mottled with crusted salt. On it rested 3 iron tripods. Daenerys laid an egg upon each, black and scarlet, cream and gold, green and bronze. The masked audience inhaled as one, a sigh like whined through broken flutes. The guide, whom she now guessed to be a high adept, approached with a clay urn sealed by threads of red hair. From the wells of Tam, the voice intoned, water that remembers the womb of the world. They poured a trickle onto each egg. Steam rose, smelling of pepper and old blood. Another adept advanced, bearing a naked sword the color of moonlit smoke. From the mines beneath Childorn, the adept said, and scored their own forearm, letting dark blood patter onto the eggs. The brazier flames whipped higher, coloring the air with screaming orange. A third stepped forward with a leather bundle. From the pyres of Stygai, hissed that one, unfurling black scales too large for any living beast, relics, perhaps, of the tyrant worm of Ingeril. They draped the scales over the eggs like funeral palls. Daenerys felt the air change, pressure building, as if the amphitheater were sinking beneath an invisible sea. Sparks spun in her vision. She forced herself to breathe. Blood of the dragon, the guide whispered directly to her. Yours must be the final key. She laid her palm over the black and scarlet egg. The shell drank her warmth with greedy intensity. From the terraces came a rustle like wind in husks. 1 heartbeat. 2. Flames licked the dais. 3. And she felt it. Pain. A needle of heat stabbing through her hand into her blood. She did not flinch. Her breath hissed between clenched teeth, yet she kept her hand pressed until, with a brittle crack, the shell beneath her palm fractured. A sliver of darkness fell away, red gold light blazing within. A shrill trill split the cavernous air. The scream of a creature older than houses, raw as birth. The amphitheater erupted in a susurrus of awe. Above, in the hollow of Asshai's corrupted sky, something answered, bats, perhaps, or spirits roused from the river ash. But she heard it only dimly. Her world had narrowed to the wet, glistening hatchling that clawed its way free, wings slick against her skin, eyes like molten garnet. Drogon, she breathed, a name shaped of smoke and tears and hope. The hatchling's tongue flickered, tasting her scent, and the brazier flames surged as if feeding on that first breath. 1 egg remained, then 2, and the ritual repeated in dizzying splendor. Regal emerging amid coils of green flame that wreaths sizzled when they touched his hide, Viserion cracking his pale prison in a burst of golden sparks. When the last shell butterflied open, a hush swallowed the night. 3 dragons, wet-winged, clung to her arms and shoulders, their chirps weaving into a single echo that seemed to pulse beneath her breastbone. Every Shadowbinder dropped to one knee, masks bowing as sails before a sudden gale. "Azantes Perses," the guide murmured, "the flame-born night." But as they bent, Daenerys saw their mask tilt upward, black silk fluttering like torn banners. Behind the obsidian lips, faint glimmers of white teeth smiled. "Your fire," the guide said, "needs walls of shadow. We shall be those walls." Thus began the forging of her army. The months that followed blurred into ritual and trial. In the catacombs beneath Asshai, she learned the art of binding shadow to flesh, how powder of frozen moonlight sprinkled on a blade could make a wound that never clotted, how candles carved from stillborn fat could call a whispering shape that raked the soul. She practiced the dance of blind swords, where one fought with eyes sewn shut, seeing only by the beat of another's heart. When she faltered, a Shadowbinder named Xanda pressed a splintered finger to Daenerys' brow and filled her dreams with the drowning songs of dead empires until she rose gasping, wiser, colder. Yora watched, wary, yet could not deny the transformation. He sparred with the Shadowbinders beneath weeping stalactites, blades ringing against obsidian spears, and he bled for every lesson. Once Xanda nearly severed his ear. The knight only laughed, dabbing the wound with wine dark as tar. The dragons grew, devouring goat carcasses, bats, even a dead leopard gifted by a caravan from ET. Their bellies expanded, scales hardening into iridescent armor. The black one loved only the flame tunnels where lava breathed. The green took wing at dusk to hunt moths as big as dinner plates. The cream gold curled beside Daenerys at night, purring like a forge under bellows. She named generals from the ranks of the Shadowbinders: Xanda the Severed Finger, Valus of the Weeping Masks, and Ifra the Knife-Tongued, who spoke only when her shadow spoke too, its lips moving a heartbeat behind her own. These three commanded 1,000 adepts, each sworn by candle oath to the blood of the dragon. They garbed themselves in lacquered armor that seemed to absorb torchlight, helmets wrought like blank faces, shoulders adorned with living silk moths dyed crimson and black. One winterless night beneath a sky green with alien auroras, Valus performed the rite of weeping. Every adept cut a slit across the palm, matching incense scars with new ones, and bled into silver bowls. The blood was painted on their masks in sigils that crawled and shifted like mercury. Daenerys drew her own blade, heartstone pommel glinting, and bared her palm without flinching. When the blood touched her maskless face, the dragons howled, as if tasting the iron on the wind. Soon after, omens pressed upon them, a rain of ash that fell upward before dissolving. A pale child drowned in a cistern, yet its corpse pointed north when fished out. The sudden bursting of every lantern along the Palace of Dust. The Shadowbinders took these as signs. The hour of march approached. Daenerys walked the vault where her forces assembled, past ranks of adepts whetting blades etched with crescent runes, past wagons stacked with jars of green naphtha that smoked at the lips, past cages of eyeless hounds bred to hunt by heartbeat alone. She felt no fear, only a resonance, as if the shadow beneath her feet hummed in time with her pulse. When dawn came gray and bruised, they departed Asshai in a column that stretched like an ink stroke across the ashen plain. The dragons spiraled overhead, their wings stirring vortices in the nearest clouds. At the van rode Daenerys, silver hair streaming from a crown wrought of fused dragon's heart. She wore mail of blackened steel fringed with shadow silk, and her cloak was the shed skin of a fireworm from the smoking cliffs of Morn. Yora bore her standard, a three-headed dragon whose tails nodded about a blood-red eclipse. At his hip hung a blade kissed by shadow flame, forged in the ninefold forges with scales from Drogon's first molt. They marched along the river Ash westward, following where its poison current wormed through cracked salt flats. Villages abandoned decades past erupted in flame as they passed, ignited by the heat of dragon fire. Sometimes Daenerys halted to watch the bones of a wooden idol collapse in sparks. Sometimes she moved on without a glance, her eyes fixed on the west and the promise of cities yet unburnt. Word raced ahead, a silver queen, dragons at her shoulders, an army whose swords cut both flesh and light. When they crossed the bones at Kaizai Pass, scouts of the pure caravans prostrated themselves, offering crates of jade lotus in return for spared lives. She accepted the tribute and fed their camels to Drogon. In the red waste, what little wind existed died. Heat shivered on the horizon, bending the column into wavering phantoms. Water skins emptied, then refilled with a black drink coaxed from cactus hearts by Ifra's poison needle ritual. Many adepts died gleaning it. None complained. The dragons hunted rock vipers and roasted them mid-air. Ash dust clung to Daenerys' throat until her voice rasped like worn parchment. She welcomed the roughness. It steadied her spell chants at night. Under the broken tower of Karth, the 13 rode out in gilt palanquins borne by eunuch guards. The merchant princes bowed low, but when Xaro Zoan Daxos raised pleading eyes, Daenerys saw only calculation in their depths. She refused his silks, his pearls, his offers of marriage, and ordered her army to encircle the city. That night the Shadowbinders sang in tongues older than stone, and black wind blew over Karth. By dawn every fountain had turned to dust, and the 13 sent a barge heaped with treasure to her encampment. She bade her dragons burn it to cinders, the coins bursting like popcorn in the flames. Then she opened the gates, not with force, but with the fear that scuttled before her. The granaries of Karth volunteered grain. The saffron sails offered ships. Daenerys took both and left the city whispering her name. Her true return began at Slaver's Bay, where pyramids ringed with harpy statues cast their long shadows over the detritus of old war. Astapor's bricks still festered with scorched gore. Yunkai's lemon trees sprouted from rubble that stank of carrion. Myreen's great pyramid rose stubborn above it all, a mountain of memories both sweet and bitter. She camped on the riverbank whose reeds had once sheltered her host, and for 3 nights listened to the bay tide, remembering dead friends and dead ambitions. On the 4th dawn, a deputation of Myreenese nobles approached, gaunt, barefoot, draped in sackcloth as penitents. They offered keys wrought of beaten copper, signifying the city. Daenerys took them in hand, felt their weight, and closed her fist. Copper shrieked between her fingers, melting to slag as Drogon exhaled a thin ribbon of flame. "I do not need your keys," she said in the tongue of Giscari kings. "Only your silence." She marched through Meereen unopposed. The poor lined the avenues, eyes wide, as her dragons shrieked overhead and Shadowbinders fanned out in phalanxes, masks reflecting nothing. At the Plaza of Pride, she paused before the harpy statue whose wings had been toppled years prior. His head lay shattered on mosaic tiles. "Leave it," she ordered when Yora moved to smash what remained. The past must watch. Night fell, and with it came her hour. The dragons perched on pyramid spires, throats pulsing like bellows. On the terrace, Xanda drew a circle of blood and salt. Valus lit candles whose flames burned black. Ifra whispered to the circle, drawing shapes in the air that trembled into half-seen geometries. Then Daenerys stepped within and raised her hands. She spoke of chains and children sold, of pale stallions dying on salt flats, of pyres where Khal screamed defiance to deaf gods. She spoke of unborn empires and suns that would never set on the House Targaryen restored. Her breath wove with the candle's smoke, twisting into tendrils that crawled across the plaza, worming into every doorway, every throat. For a heartbeat, the whole city seemed to exhale with her, and their collected pain rose like a cloud of fireflies, then turned to embers and was gone. The dragons roared. Across Slaver's Bay, ships at anchor exploded, hulls blossoming into fire petals as shadow oil spilled and caught. The noon gate of Yunkai folded like damp parchment under a hammer of unseen force. In Astapor, the bronze bells of the Red Temple melted into puddles that hissed against the cobbles. Her army moved without trumpets, advancing behind walls of living shadow that swallowed arrows. They seized arsenals, pools, slave pens, yet killed only those who resisted. By dawn of the 2nd day, the cities lay silent under an ash-gray dawn. When the smoke cleared, Daenerys climbed the pyramid summit and looked west again, to the Stormlands, to King's Landing, to the Iron Throne forged by Aegon's own dragons. Her new generals knelt, and their shadows knelt behind them, rippling like black banners in a wind only they could feel. "Westeros," whispered Valus, silver mask slick with blood and candle wax. "Home," Yora murmured, though his voice trembled at what they had wrought. "Fire," hissed Drogon above, wings unfurling against the dawn. Daenerys closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her lids, she saw the red keep rising from green water, saw Shadowbinders scaling its crimson walls, their masks bright as dying stars. She saw dragons coiling through towers, melting stone, splitting the sky with thunderous cries. She saw an iron chair warping under white-hot talons. But beyond all that, she saw people kneeling, some in awe, some in terror, none in doubt. And she smiled, slow as the first crack appearing in winter ice beneath spring sun. There would be time yet for mercy, time yet for law and healing. But first must come the shadow to shelter her fire. She opened her eyes to the waking world, to the smell of cinders and sea salt, to the keen hush of an empire catching its breath, and she spoke a single word, soft, certain, and inexorable as dawn. "Dracarys." The dragons leapt, the horizon kindled, and the Queen of Shadow and Flame began the last march home. Smoke lingered over Meereen for 3 days, clinging to the terraces like a shroud too heavy for dawn to lift. Ash settled into every gutter and garden, frosting lemon leaves a brittle gray. From the balcony outside her bedchamber, Daenerys watched moats penned in shafts of dull sunlight, drifting around the dragons as they dozed upon scorched stone. Drogon sprawled widest, a black mountain whose flanks rose and fell with the slow confidence of a storm at anchor. Viserion had curled beside the great bronze harpy's broken talon, luminous wings sheathing him in burnished gold. Rhaegal perched on the parapet, tail lashing, emerald eyes tracking any flicker that might threaten his queen. All three had grown since Asshai, bones lengthening, sinews thickening, the fuzz of infant down giving way to ridged scales hard as hammered steel. Their presence distorted the air itself. Heat shimmered around them like souls struggling to escape. Noise drifted up from the plaza below. The clank of salvage crews dragging molten harpy heads into wagons, the mutter of freedmen sweeping ash from thresholds, the low, inexorable rhythm of soldiers striking camp. Yet an undercurrent threaded every sound, one she had come to recognize. Anticipation, taut and brittle as drawn wire. Her army was ready to move. She inhaled the acrid scent of ruin, tasting iron on the breeze, and let her thoughts ride westward until they found stone walls painted red by sunset. King's Landing. The vision hovered, spires licked by dragon fire, shadows scudding across the city like thunderheads, her banner atop the ramparts. She could see it more clearly each dawn, a picture burnished by certainty. But certainty was not enough. She must forge the path herself. Footsteps approached behind her, measured, heavy even in restraint. Jorah Mormont stepped into the balcony's threshold and bowed, dark hair matted by sweat, a fresh cut stitched at his jawline where a shadow blade had kissed him during last night's drills. He looked older than the man who had once traded in secrets for a royal pardon, but harder too, tempered by exile, betrayal, devotion. "The fleet is almost provisioned," he reported. "Grain holds full, water casks brined, shadow oil secured below the waterline as you commanded. Valus oversees stowage. No accidents so far." "No accidents yet," she corrected softly, still watching the dragons. "Shadow oil is treacherous. Make certain the barrels are cradled in ashcloth and chained." "Done." He hesitated. "One more matter. The envoy from Volantis waits in the audience hall. The Triarchs beg audience, bearing gifts and assurances of safe passage should we forego the Rhoyne Delta." She turned. Morning light etched her cheekbones like lunar crescents, revealing hollows beneath gray-blue eyes that seldom closed now without coaxing. Her face, once girlish, had grown austere, a mirror polished by necessity. "Volantis fears us. They would not dare raise their black walls against dragons. Yet their fleets still command the estuaries." She considered a moment. "Let them wait. A day. A week. They will send another envoy more desperate. Each hour of silence phrased their courage. As you wish. Another figure stepped from the shadows of the bedchamber arch. Xanda the Severed Finger, her mask a split disc of ivory and jet, eye sockets rimmed with drying blood. She knelt, folding like a raven alighting upon a bough. Mother of Flame, she rasped, voice hoarse from nightly chant. The omens stir. Last eve the candles of black wax burned upside down, dripping flame rather than tallow. A sign that the sea will conspire with us, not against. Good, Daenerys said, though omens seldom soothed her anymore. Gather the captains at dusk. We sail on the spring tide. She dismissed them and lingered on the balcony after they departed. Regal's head cocked, nostrils flaring. A moment later he snorted smoke at her shoulder, the sulfur tickling her throat. She rested a gloved hand on his muzzle, feeling the tremor of subterranean fire beneath scale and bone. Soon, she whispered. The dragon hummed. A forge door swung ajar. That night, beneath a curdled moon, her captains gathered in the audience hall. A pillared chamber once draped in brocade and perfumed with myrish oils, now stripped to bare sandstone pocked by fire and shadow. Braziers filled with smoldering jade coals painted the room in sickly light. Maps unrolled across a slab table, parchment the color of drowned bone, ink glistening where sea lanes converged like veins. Ifra the knife-tongued began the recitation. 32 seaworthy hulls, 9 dramans seized from Karth, 11 carracks from the Yunkish fleet, half skeletal but patched, and 12 light galleys gifted by Myrine's shipwrights eager to appease their conqueror. Sailors enough to crew them twice over, some volunteers, some pressed. A corps of 800 Shadowbinders stand ready. Another 3,000 freedmen bear pikes or blades. 200 unsullied, survivors of Astapor's ruins, request leave to join our host. Daenerys traced a fingertip from Slaver's Bay to Valyria's smoking peninsula, then along the ragged southern edge of Essos toward the summer sea. We will skirt the Valyrian coast where smokes rise, then angle for Volantis. Their triarchs will either open their river to us or watch it boil. If they serve, we take supplies, willing oarsmen, coin, copper. If not, her nail tapped the parchment. A line of dots led into the Rhoynar mouth like footprints disappearing into darkness. Yora leaned forward, brow furrowing. If Volantis refuses, we'll face siege walls girded by the Black Pearl and a slave legion of 50,000. Triarchs may bend, but the old blood will not. They fear a new Valyrian dominion more than death. Then they will taste both, Vaelus said, mask glimmering. Shadow flame melts black walls as salt melts ice. Yora's jaw tightened, disdain for magic warring with loyalty. Walls crumble, yes, but cities endure. Burn Volantis and we inherit only cinders. Better to cow them, not destroy. Fear without fire is hollow, Ifra murmured in her sibilant lilt. A husk that reanimates the moment backs are turned. Daenerys lifted her gaze. We will offer the Triarchs a choice. Surrender their slave collars and ships. Swear fealty to the Dragon Queen. Accept new laws, no chains, no sacrifices to the Red Flower, no slave soldiers. In return, they keep their commerce and their lives. Refuse and Volantis burns. Let that be my first decree to the world beyond Slaver's Bay. Silence settled, broken only by the hiss of coals. Even Yora bowed his head, conceding. Draw up terms, she ordered. At dawn we sail. The fleet departed on a morning wind that smelled of rain on dust. Sails of sable silk blazoned with 3 red dragons billowed from yardarms, shadows prowling across the bay like great beasts freed. The dragons themselves took flight ahead, streaking above the vanguard to scout. Below decks lay barrels of shadow oil swaddled in felt, amphorae of nap the sealed with wax sigils, and crates of obsidian arrowheads sprayed with powdered frost venom. Each deckhand carried a talisman of black salt and a scrap of dragon scale. Protections, the Shadowbinders claimed, against the darker currents spiraling beneath the waves. By the third night, the stars vanished behind a vault of smoky cloud. The sea calmed, yet the ships glided as if some unseen hand pushed them, hulls slicing water that rippled phosphorescent green. Crewmen muttered prayers. Some swore the wake shone with shapes. Serpents coiled around forgotten towers. Xanda declared it fortune, the ghosts of Valyria guiding their kin. Daenerys walked the Misericord's quarterdeck with bare feet, letting wooden planks cool the ache in her soles. Yora strode beside her, torch pitching shadows across weather-beaten boards. "You have not slept since departure," he observed. "I dream enough awake." She leaned over the rail. The sea below seemed lower than usual, as if the ship floated upon a mirror, stars trapped beneath its surface. "Tell me, Ser Yora, do you recall the first night we crossed the Dothraki Sea? When you told me no Khal had ever crossed water because the horse could not drink salt." "I remember," he said carefully. "I envied the simplicity of that fear. Water is water, horse is horse, each knowing its bounds. How easily the Dothraki set limits upon themselves. We have none. That is freedom and burden. You bear it well." She turned, studying the pale ridges of scar where old Volantis Overseer had once lashed him. "Your burdens weigh too, old bear. You could go ashore at Volantis. Sail north, seek forgiveness." His lips twitched, half smile, half wound. "I swore my sword until you sit a throne. And when I do, then I'll ask leave to die in peace." She might have laughed once. Now she merely nodded. "Not yet, then," thunder growled in the distance. A moment later, violet lightning forked inside the cloud bank, illuminating droplet curtains that never fell. Rhaegal's silhouette looped through the flash, wings wide. The dragons whistled to one another, restless. Below, sailors cried out, figures in the water, hands reaching. Lanterns swept the waves, revealing ragged shadows bobbing. Drowned men, blue lips parted, eyes like milky pearls. Some clutched iron collars crusted with rust. Storm runaways from Yunkai, perhaps, or slaves cast overboard by fleeing masters. The sea had kept them, yet refused to claim their chains. "Bring them aboard," Daenerys ordered at once. Men lowered rope nets, but when the first cadaver was hauled dripping onto the deck, it lurched upright, water cataracting from its beard in black streams. The sailors staggered back, shrieking. The corpse uttered no sound, but its jaw twitched as if remembering speech. Then the rusty collar cracked, snapped by unseen force, and fell ringing across the planks before the body crumpled like a sack of rot. Other corpses reached the nets. Each one shed its chain, then collapsed lifeless. By dawn, scores of rusted collars lay heaped on the foredeck, stink overpowering tar and salt. None dared touch them. Xanda ordered the pile bound in net and tossed back to sea. An offering, she claimed, to the silent sisters of the deep. Daenerys watched the collars vanish beneath a whirlpool that had no wind to birth it, metal glinting once then gone. Yora crossed himself with a sign taught by Rhoynar fishers. "The sea itself rises against slavery, or answers to my cause," she said, yet her voice held wonder. Volantis's black walls reared upon the horizon 5 days later, a charred crown half sunk in marshy mire, bristling with siege scorpions large as whales. Smoke ribbons spiraled from towers where red priests tended eternal fires to the Lord of Light. Beyond, the city sprawled astride the Rhoyne, black basalt mosaicked by orange tile roofs and gardens of weeping cedar. River galleys huddled within chain-boomed docks like chicks under a hawk's shadow. Broad banners hung from watchtowers showing the 3 triarch sigils: chain, elephant, tiger. A slender white galley rode forth under flag of parley. The envoy, a woman in Valarscorian mail, face veiled in white lace, was escorted to the Misericord's wardroom. She named herself Triarch Alessa of the Elephants, voice brittle with diplomacy. Her courtly vowels stumbled when she beheld Drogon roosting on the mizzen, wings mantling the mainsail like night itself. "High honor," she said, knuckles whitening around a scroll case. "The Triarchs bid peaceful passage, if her grace refrains from sorcery within black wall bounds." Daenerys gestured to an oaken stool. "Seat." Alessa sat rigid. Sweat beaded her temples. She placed the scroll upon the table, terms inscribed in gold dust ink. Daenerys broke the seal, eyes scanning elegantly wrought concessions. 1,500 oarsmen, 10 war galleys, 30,000 bushels of rice, a convoy of artisans to rebuild Marine, all contingent upon Daenerys not entering the city, never claiming tribute, returning hostages if taken. An offer shaped by fear, yet gilded. She laid the parchment flat. You forgot one thing. Triarch. Freedom. Volantis remains the beating heart of Associ slavery. Your black walls hide what? 500,000 in chains. I will have them freed. Then we talk passage. Alessa's throat clicked.
Impossible.
The Triarchy stands upon property. Remove the chains and the walls crumble. Then let them crumble. The envoy's composure shattered. Desperation leaked into her voice. Even Aegon the Conqueror saw fit to negotiate. His dragons spared Volantis. His, Daenerys said softly, were only beasts. Mine have shadows for spears. She stood, the hall seeming to shrink around her sudden height. Return to your Triarchs. Tell them my fleet sails on tomorrow's tide. Your choice is to open your river and free your slaves, or bar the gates and water the ruins with ash. Alessa swallowed, rose, bowed. I will convey your mercy. She departed under guard. Yora watched her boat retreat across sun-glinted chop. They will deliberate until panic drowns prudence. The old blood may strike before dawn. Let them, Daenerys said. Night favors shadow. Hours after sunset, a flotilla of Volantene fireships drifted into sight. Unmanned hulks, sails stitched from pitch-drenched canvas, hulls crammed with jars of wildfire. Current dragged them toward the Misericord's keel, silent, irresistible.
Alarm bells rang.
Galleys rowed to intercept, but their oars snagged nets intentionally draped across the channel, entangling them. Upon the flagship's prow, Valus lifted a horn carved from kraken beak and blue. The note quivered in the gut, sound like cold iron bending. Shadowbinders manned the rails, candles of black wax cupped in palms. They chanted words that bruised the air. Candle flames elongated, then leapt as dark wisps, streaking low across water. Wherever the wisps touched, pitch-black tendrils uncoiled, slithering onto the fireship hulls. Wood groaned. One vessel's bow split open, not from explosion but implosion, the tinder turning to black sand that collapsed inward, swallowing the wildfire jars before they could spark. Another hulk folded upon itself, mast plunging through deck with the ease of a spear into mud. In moments, 5 fireships were nothing but heaps of smoldering cinders sinking languidly beneath green-tinted waves. But the sea caught flame regardless. The 6th hulk's jars shattered prematurely. Emerald fire roared across the surface, chasing tar slicks toward the Misericord. Sailors screamed. Regal stooped, exhaling incandescent breath that carved a corridor of vapor through the wildfire, isolating pockets which Xanda's acolytes quenched by flinging sacks of sleep salt. Viserion circled, beating wings to starve flames of air. Drogon plunged into the inferno, scales gleaming like a god of night armored in stars, and drank the fire, inhaling until the conflagration shrank, contorting around him as though devoured. When dawn bled across the horizon, the river mouth lay choked with charred spars. Volantis's black walls loomed beyond, silent, no banners stirring. A single gatehouse banner fluttered white. Alessa returned at midday, sans veil, eyes bare and rimmed by sleeplessness. She knelt on Misericord's deck before Daenerys and placed a simple iron key on the planks. The chains are broken, she said, voice ash. Volantis is yours to pass unhindered. The slave markets lie closed. For good, we pray. Cheers erupted among freedmen on the midships. Sailors beat oars against bulwarks. Daenerys only nodded. Rise, Triarch. Return to your people. Rule them wisely, for they are free now. Fail, and I will return. Alessa swallowed, bowed, and departed. Yora exhaled long, relief and awe mingling. You broke Volantis without breaching her walls. I offered choice, Daenerys replied. They chose dawn over darkness. Remember that when Westeros judges me a butcher. West of the Valyrian Peninsula, tempests brewed eternal, swirling vapors like smoke above a battle scar. Old Valyria's doom still frothed beneath the crust, belching fire mists that scarred the sky. The fleet skirted the jagged coast. Dragons soared over smoldering islets, plucking salamander eels from lava pools. On deck, Shadowbinders murmured to unseen things prowling volcanic cliffs. Some said they fed the darkness with songs of surrender, so it would not stray to the ships. By the time they reached the summer sea, half the crew swore they heard singing beneath the waves. Minor keys sorrowful, yet strangely exultant. And once, at moonrise, Daenerys herself saw shapes under the surface. Pillars of fused glass, towers unfallen, the ghost of a city shimmering 7 fathoms down. Valyria, memory turned liquid. She dreamt that night of stone mouths whispering riddles in High Valyrian. When she woke, her pillow was soaked with tears that smelled of brimstone. Drogon lay curled around the foot of her bed, head on paws like a cat too large for any hearth. She stroked his serrated crest until he huffed and the nightmare dissolved. The fleet sighted the Jade Steps, islands strewn like beads across the gateway to the narrow sea, and dropped anchor at Bloodstone, stronghold of reavers and smugglers. Rookeries in Westeros would already know of her approach. Ravens flew faster than hulls. Better than to claim a foothold where law rarely reached. Bloodstone's lordling, a lean man with gold beard braids and tattoos of sea snakes, welcomed her with wine and half-truths. His free company had thrived selling war spoils to Myr and Lys. Now he bowed low, pressing calloused lips to her signet. Behind him, his cell's words shifted uneasily as dragons wheeled overhead. Fear again, sweet and useful. Daenerys offered the lordling a bargain. His harbor for her flagship, his warehouses for her stores, his men for her cause. In return, she promised him amnesty, titles in the new kingdom, and tenfold profit in legal trade once seas were pacified. He accepted before dusk. By dawn, Bloodstone's black flag had been replaced by the red dragon, its staff rooted in a mound of emptied chain collars fished from the fleet's ballast. On the 4th morning, a raven arrived bearing scrolls sealed with wax shaped like a direwolf's head. From the north, Yora delivered them while she broke her fast on salted figs. She unrolled the first, parchment creased by long flight, ink hastily scribed. Queen Daenerys Stormborn, I write from Winterfell under banners not flown in a generation. The North remembers. Rumor reaches us of dragons hatched anew, of shadow marching across the seas. Some tremble, some hope. I know fear and hope wear the same mask until unmasked by deed. The realm bleeds. Cersei Lannister's crown buys nothing but silent grudges. The Reach starves, the Riverlands smolder, the Ironborn raid unchecked. If you come to save Westeros, prove it with justice. If you come to conquer, expect northern steel. Yet I believe chains belong broken. Send envoy to White Harbor. Carve no path lined with children's bones, and you will find our gates less cold than our winds. Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell. The second scroll bore the seal of a rose, though petals wilted in transit. Khaleesi,
Highgardens Orchards Rot Beneat Lannister Boot.
My family murdered, our banner torn, yet a Tyrell survives to nurture thorns. Should you turn shadow upon the Red Keep, know the Reach hungers for new spring. Harbor us, and we will feed your host. Alara Tyrell, warden in hiding. The third bore a squid in black wax, edges cracked. Dragon Queen, sea does not burn. We are storms. Come west and we will drown you. Euron, king of salt and rock. She crushed the squid seal into powder. Yora watched. Enemies declare themselves. As do allies, she said, tapping Sansa's letter. The North offers reason. The Reach offers bread. The Iron Islands, noise. She folded the parchments. Send ravens to WH. White Harbor and Tarth. Summon lords discontent. Promise justice, promise freedom. Promise fear to those who refuse. Words are wind, Yora cautioned. So are banners, she answered. Yet both can precede armies. In secret grottos beneath Bloodstone, Xanda and her adepts enacted the rite of burnished shadow. forging armor for Regal and Viserion from plates of blackened steel lined with woven dragon hair collected during molts. Edges overlapped like scales within scales, weightless yet strong enough to shatter crossbow quarrels. Drogon refused the harness, biting at anyone who approached with hammer or rivet. He needed none, Daenerys decided. His hide was mail. Meanwhile, Valis trained freedmen in the silent advance. Phalanxes moving under cloak of night, each soldier's shadow step matching the next, so 1,000 boots fell as one. They marched through surf at low tide, unseen beneath cliffs. Their discipline grew until even Yora conceded they rivaled Unsullied. Ifra oversaw the breeding of whisper dogs, eyeless hounds whose ears picked heartbeats through walls. They would flush out traitors in King's Landing, sniffing fear. Daenerys allowed the breeding pens but ordered no cruelty beyond need. Beasts deserved purpose, not torment. Yet shadows feed on more than bladecraft. Each fortnight Daenerys presided over the Hall of Chains, a cavern where freed captives from Essos recounted horrors while adepts transcribed. Night after night she listened. Children sold for verse of a nursery rhyme, wives burned for faith, elders whipped for failing to smile. Stories piled like skulls. She took them all, letting each lodge in her marrow. When tears came, rarely, they cooled against the embers of resolve. One dusk, after a girl named Hope described life in the fighting pits, Daenerys dismissed the scribes and walked alone to the cliffs overlooking pounding surf. Wind raked her hair, shadows of gulls wheeled. She felt weight crushing her chest, iron forging into stone. She sensed Yora before he spoke. "You cannot bear every scar." "I must," she said without turning. "If I forget even one, I become the tyrant they fear. You become stone, and stone feels nothing, good or ill." She looked at him then, eyes rimmed by sea spray. Would stone weep? He offered no answer. Drogon cried overhead, an echo of pain or promise. She could not tell. When the fleet sailed again, hulls refitted, holds brimming with rich grain donated in secret by sympathetic traders, they steered for Tarth, the Sapphire Isle. Word came by Gull. Lord Selwyn Tarth offered safe harbor and alliance in exchange for protection against Euron's longships. They found the island's eastern bays littered with burned fisher huts, nets ragged as old wounds. Euron's cruelty had bitten deep. Daenerys landed with 200 Shadowbinders and 50 Unsullied veterans. Lord Selwyn greeted her barefoot on the surf-scoured beach, sunlight glinting off water's blue as bottled sky. His daughter, Brienne, towered at his side, a warrior in bruised steel, eyes earnest as new dawn. Snowy cliffs echoed with Drogon's roar as he looped low, shadow chasing wave spray. Fisherfolk knelt, mouthing prayers. Brienne alone remained standing, head tilted back to follow the dragon's sweep, wonder alight upon her plain features. "You honor House Tarth," Selwyn said, bowing, "and bring hope where hope had fled." His gaze flicked to the legion of cloaked figures behind her. "Your soldiers are unlike any host our isle has seen. Each a candle in my night," Daenerys replied. "And yours, Lord Selwyn, if you join me." "Gladly." He extended a parchment, a pledge of fealty. She marked it with a sigil burned from Regal's exhalation, molten glass fusing into the seal. That night they feasted on spiced mackerel and honeyed yams beneath pavilions glowing amber. Musicians played warbled tunes, disrupted by the occasional quake of dragon wings. Selwyn pledged 200 archers. Brienne offered her sword, Oathkeeper. Daenerys accepted both, and shared counsel long past moonrise with the tall maiden knight, speaking of honor and liberation. Brienne's sincerity struck her like cold mountain water. Here, at last, was virtue unadorned by politics. "I swore to protect the innocent," Brienne said. "If your war shields them, my blade is yours." Daenerys clasped the knight's calloused hands. "Every child in chains is a blow struck at my heart. Help me end the scourge, and we forge a realm where oaths bind more than blood." Lightning flickered far offshore, perhaps storm, perhaps Euron's sorcery. Brienne lifted her face to the wind. "Then we will need more than swords. We will need light." Daenerys smiled, small and fierce. "I bring dragons." Ravens bore her banner north and south. From Dorne's desert castles came whispers. Prince Quentyn Manwoody would ride to her aid if she upheld Dornish law. In the Stormlands, a kingdom shattered by battle, men rallied under forgotten banners of buckler and musgood, pledging in advance to the Queen of Flame. Yet tides flowed both ways. Cersei Lannister fortified Blackwater Bay, forging scorpions to dwarf those of King Maegor. The Ironborn raided Tarth again, testing her claim. And in Old Town, the High Tower announced an alliance with the Golden Company. Sellswords renowned for breaking, not bending. Daenerys studied each Raven scroll by candlelight, their wax seals pooling into the shape of continents on her writing desk. War, like winter, gathered in drifts. But she felt no chill, only the heat of dragons at her back. One dawn, as red seeped into sky, Shadowbinders guided the fleet from Tartha's blue harbors toward the mainland. A soft mist quilted the water. Somewhere a morning bell tolled, one, twice, thrice, echo swallowed by gull cries. On the Misericord's forecastle, Daenerys stood clad in supple black mail etched with flowing Valyrian glyphs. Drogon settled onto the spar deck, folding wings with the sigh of a falling curtain. Yora approached, helm under arm, salt wind riffing his gray-flecked hair. "Landfall by dusk," he said. "Driftmark's beaches are clear, scouts saw only crabbers. From there, we march on Blackwater Bay." The Crown's throat. She rested a hand on the rail as if feeling for Westeros's pulse. "And after, the city. It will not yield bloodlessly." "I know." She faced him. "But every step since Asshai has narrowed the blade. We strike now, swift, decisive, or we become story, not storm." Yora inclined his head, acceptance and pride mingling. "I follow you to fire or frost." She touched his cheek, the scarred one, and felt gratitude coil warm in her chest. Behind them, drums rolled. Steady, low, thrumming through timber. Cloaked armies formed ranks on deck. Shadowbinders immobile as statues, freedmen gripping spears, unsullied shields gleaming. Whisper dogs whined in their cages, sensing coming tumult. Overhead, the dragons stretched wings, catching the sun's first fire. Wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and distant hearth smoke. Westeros. Daenerys closed her eyes. She thought of chains clinking underwater, of collars falling, of a throne forged in dragon flame waiting to be remade by the same. She drew breath, tasting salt and cinder, and in that breath lived a promise to every voice that ever cried for freedom. When she opened her eyes again, they were molten amethyst, and the sea before her seemed to tilt forward, as if bowing. "Onward," she said, voice low yet resonant enough to carry across the fleet, through every hull into every waiting heart. "Onward to dawn." Drogon roared, a note that shook gulls from the sky and sent ripples racing toward distant shores. Rhaegal and Viserion answered, their cries weaving a chord that felt like the world's spine aligning. The drums quickened, sails bellied, Shadowbinders raised their arms, and for an instant, every banner of House Targaryen ignited in phantom fire. Red dragons writ in flame, unfurling across canvas then vanishing, leaving silk untouched but hearts seared. Ships surged as one, prows cleaving mist. The horizon ahead brightened, orange bleeding into gold, as though the sun himself rose to accompany their charge. And somewhere beyond that rim of light stood the Red Keep, crown of a realm sick with tyranny, ripe for cauterizing. Daenerys Stormborn, breaker of chains, queen of shadow and flame, smiled into the wind. Let the world be remade. Moonlight silvered the narrow sea long after the fleet departed Tarth, stippling the water with coin-bright motes that winked against the hulls as though some sunken kingdom paid tribute in secret. The Misericord led, prow carving a quiet path westward while the rest of the armada formed a tapering spear behind her. No drums now, no shouts, only the hush of disciplined silence and the low creak of rigging that spoke in ancient syllables of wind and wood. Above, 3 dragons glided in patient orbits, their wing beats measured, steady. So the fleet sailed beneath shifting canopies of shadow that came and went like thoughts. Daenerys stood at the bow, cloak pinned by the night's chill, gaze fixed on a horizon obscured by mist. Westeros lay beyond that veil, yet for these few hours she lingered in the narrow corridor between exile and homecoming, tasting each breath like the last draft of a long fast. She felt every plank beneath her boots as if it were heartbeat rather than timber, every sigh of wind against her cheek as memory rather than air. Behind her, decks bristled with men and women who had lived entire lives without dreaming they might cross an ocean for the sake of an idea. Now they bent to that dream, their silhouettes black against lantern glow, each figure tethered to hope by an invisible thread. She let her eyes close. The sea's murmur blossomed into vision. Brienne drilling archers on Tartha's cliffs, their arrows stitching the sky with silent promises. Regal shaking brine from his wings over Driftmark's reefs, scales iridescent beneath a gull-crowded sun. Volantis' freedmen kneeling in the dust, collars shattered at their feet, tears cutting channels through soot. The images swirled, coalesced, then melted into the single shape of an iron chair forged in dragonfire, its barbs glistening wet, as though just pulled from a furnace. Her hand tightened on the rail. Soon, a sail snapped somewhere aft, canvas protesting a gust. Footfalls approached, muffled yet brisk. Yora. He halted a respectful stride behind her. She did not turn. His presence filled the space like a steadying weight. "Scouts sight Driftmark's beacon," he said. "An hour at most." She opened her eyes to the thinning mist. "Show me." He lifted a hand toward portside darkness. She followed his gesture. There, a single ember trembled on the horizon, fluctuating crimson, dimming, flaring again. Driftmark's ancient tower, lit by dragonstone oil. A signal older than recorded tides. Safe harbor within gravid reefs, treacherous waters to foes. The beacon winked thrice, paused, winked twice. Code for unopposed approach, as arranged by rumors of a Valerion still loyal to blood and flame. Daenerys exhaled. "Alert the Shadowbinders. No torches above deck. We arrive as phantoms. As you command." He withdrew. She lingered until the beacon swelled, until subtle shapes of shore cliffs rose black against deeper black. Then she stepped aft, drawing her cloak close, and descended to the captain's gallery where Valis, Ifra, and Xanda waited. Their masks gleamed in lamplight, silver tear tracks, obsidian tongues, rivulets of translucent resin that never dried. They bowed in unison. "The isle stands ready, mother," Valis said, his voice muffled but fervent. 200 Valerion spears, half a dozen tide runners to map the shoals. "Good," she answered, "but we treat them as honored guests, not subjects. House Valerion is old as mine. Respect binds deeper than fear here." The three inclined their heads again. Xanda's shadow, cast by a single lantern behind her, moved a half heartbeat out of time, lifting a hand before she did, lowering as she held still. Daenerys ignored the trick. She had grown accustomed to these small dislocations, the physical world fraying at edges where shadow met flame. "Have the freedmen sleep in shifts," she continued. "When we land, there will be no rest until Blackwater Bay. And caution the dragons. Reefs rise near the surface. Scale against coral still bleeds. We walk in your wake," Ifra replied, her words and her shadow's lips aligning with perfect dissonance. Soon the Misericord glided through a labyrinth of breakers, a serpentine channel that only locals dared attempt under moon alone. Reef tips rasped ghostly against the hull, but cunning hands in the hold adjusted ballast water and the ship slid through without kissing stone. Other vessels followed in single file, each guided by a lantern hung low from the stern of the one ahead. Starfall on black water. Driftmark's cove lay shoehorned between pentagonal cliffs like a mouth half shut in secret. The fleet nestled there as the beacon doused, sails furled, masts creaked into rest. Already rowboats bobbed from the dock, lanterns hooded, and voices called in hushed Valyrian dialects older than King's Landing itself. Daenerys disembarked with a retinue stripped to essence. Yora, Brienne, Valis, and 10 unsullied. The dock planks echoed under armored boots. Salt and ash wind battered her braids. Faded banners drooped from pier posts, seahorse rampant over argent field. Frayed, colors leached by years but unmistakable. House Valerion. A tall figure approached beneath the banner, armor lacquered midnight blue, cloak of sea silk shimmering even in darkness. When he removed his helm, silver-white hair spilled free, caught briefly by the wind. Corlys Valerion's line stands to greet the blood of Aegon, he said, bowing gracefully. His eyes, a paler shade of lilac than her own, shone with unshed tears. I am Orys Valerion, Lord of the Tides by birthright abandoned when the Lannisters claimed my shipping lanes. You are welcome, cousin. She stepped forward, palms open, a gesture half embrace, half treaty. House Valerion's loyalty was never forgotten. She noticed scars across Orys's throat. A rope burn, perhaps, or chain. They clasped forearms. He led her inland along a torchlit path flanked by spearbearers in scaled mail trimmed with barnacle-encrusted bronze. Ghost crabs scuttled across the stone as they passed. The island smelled of wet slate, brine, and night-blooming anemones. Atop a wind-scoured bluff stood High Tide Keep, a low sprawl of fused stone bastions whose windows bore stained-glass wyverns. A feast awaited inside, modest, hastily prepared. Salt-baked grouper, rope-grown oysters, bread dark with squid ink, wine-tinted coral pink. Yet none ate with abandon. Tension thickened the air, spiderwebbing across candle flames. Orys spoke of Lannister embargoes, of Euron's Reaver longships pillaging crab villages, of rumors that a Sellsword armada funded by the Iron Bank massed in Tyroshi ports. While he talked, Daenerys studied faces around the table. His wife, shy and sharp-eyed. His daughter, Vaila, braids looped in sailors' knots. 3 knights weathered by deck life, skin tanned, brows seamed by salt. They did not look defeated. They looked hungry. I ask one thing in return for harbor, Orys finally said, voice steady. That when the time comes, you grant Driftmark's fleet the honor of leading the first charge on Blackwater Bay. We have scores to settle that cannot be paid by coin alone. Daenerys considered. Outside narrow windows, Regal roared. A deep, resonant call that vibrated the glass. She met Orys's gaze. Granted, on dawn of our assault, the sea will boil under Valerion keels. His shoulders eased as if he had cast off years. Then Driftmark is yours. The days that followed blurred into sharpened purpose. Shipwrights labored through cold dawns to sheath prows in dragon steel, plating hammered thin and quenched in brine spiced with wyvern gall. Vaelus's adepts embedded shards of obsidian under the plating, edges outward, so enemy hulls that tried to grapple would shred upon contact. Freedmen trained alongside Valerion archers, learning to splice ropes, furl sails, mend nets. For soon every able body would fight upon water before land was granted. High-tide smiths forged fresh arrowheads from raw Valyrian glass dredged centuries ago from sea vents. The glass hissed when cooled, singing of storms. Shadowbinders etched runes along the shafts. Chants whispered as each shaft turned under calloused fingers. Flight carved to seek gaps in plate, to curve on unseen wind. Rumor spread that a single volley could blot stars. The dragons feasted on whale blubber to swell their flames. Fishermen fed them from barges, daring, fearful, reverent, while Daenerys watched from a skiff, measuring each span of wing, each gout of fire, each new adult tooth like a dagger of onyx. Drogon, largest, scorched the sea until steam rose in curtains. Regal snatched seals with playful cruelty. Viserion preferred to circle at altitude, descending only when hunger outweighed curiosity. Nightly, in caverns beneath high tide, Xanda's inner cadre enacted the Veil Rift rite, weaving living shadow across silk banners, breathing shapes into them that knelt only to her queen. Each banner, when unfurled, fluttered though air lay still. Designs crawled, tails uncoiling, wings flaring. They would break enemy morale before swords crossed. Meanwhile ravens came, feathers weary, bearing sigils both known and forgotten. From the Stormlands, Selmy of Harvest Hall offered 500 men if pardoned for desertion under Stannis. From the Reach, Lady Alara Tyrell crushed Mace's last retainers, and pledged Highgarden's hidden stores of grain in exchange for justice against Cersei. From the Westerlands' silence, Lannister gold bought loyalty too deep for ink. Yet news leaked that Riverlords massed at the Trident, restless under a Frey regent child, and looked east for a spark she would bring. On the 21st night, Brienne entered Daenerys' chambers, armor still dripping from rain. "Scouts report a single galley slipping from King's Landing," she said. "Black sails, no light, course set south by southwest. Likely courier to Old Town or Bravos." "Board," Daenerys said without hesitation. Within the hour, a Valyrian Tidrunner overtook the courier. Boarding hooks clanged, screams rose, cut short. When the Tidrunner returned at dawn, its captain knelt on Misericordia's deck and presented a sealed chest. Inside lay parchments stamped with the hand of the Queen. Cersei's command to Euron: sail north, burn White Harbor before the Dragon Queen secured northern grain. Another scroll detailed a pact with Old Town. In exchange for the Faith Militant's blessing, Hightower fleets would blockade Gullet Strait, starve Driftmark. Daenerys read by lantern glow. When she finished, she passed the pages to Brienne, who flushed with controlled fury. "Euron must not reach White Harbor," Brienne said. "He will not," Daenerys returned. "We sail tonight. Shadow rides our wakes." Preparations quickened. Tiderunners outfitted with reef guides, shadow oil barrels lashed beneath waterlines. Driftmark's beacons were doused. Not even moonlight was allowed to catch on helm. Dragons fed one last time until their bellies glowed warm beneath scale. Before departure, Daenerys climbed the cliff where old Valyrian lords buried their dead, standing upright in stone coffins facing east, to greet each dawn. She stood among those statues, wind pulling salt tears from her eyes. In the distance, her fleet shimmered under starlight like a great steel serpent coiled across the dark. She spoke to the dead. "If blood calls to blood, watch now. I become the storm my ancestors only summoned." The fleet rounded Cape Wrath beneath clouds gravid with thunder. Lightning painted sea and sky in quicksilver strobe, revealing silhouettes of cliffs where ravens huddled in the wind. No songbirds nested here, only crows. The dragons flew low, their bellies flickering with inner furnace light, wingtips brushing spray. At midnight, Ifra's whisper dogs began to whine. First a few, then a chorus. Dawn still hid beyond the curve of the world, yet ahead the horizon pulsed with orange smudge. Fire. By second bell, they sighted torches on the water. Dozens, then hundreds, flickering in perfect rows. Euron's fleet anchored in double crescent across White Harbor's mouth, hulls chained in iron spans to present an unbroken wall. On each prow, a ram shaped like a kraken's beak jutted above spiked prows. And beyond, on shore, the white city walls glimmered in lethal hush. No bells, no warning lights. Euron planned to breach at sunrise, when defenders least expected. Daenerys' armada slipped behind a veil of fog conjured by regal flying tight spirals above warm current and cold wind, his wing turbulence coaxing condensation. The Shadowbinders lined decks, candles hidden but burning blue in cupped hands. Their chants rose and fell, weaving silence. On the Misericordia's quarterdeck, Vaelus clutched the kraken horn once blown before Volantis. One note pulsed into the storm, low, subterranean. Water answered. Tides shifted, swirling beneath enemy hulls. Drogon soared high until he became a smudge above lightning. Then he folded wings and plummeted toward the center of Euron's line, opening jaws just before impact. His roar merged with thunder, and a column of flame punched through fog, painting kraken prows gold an instant before they burst. Decks exploded outward, men hurled skyward like embers. The shockwave rocked nearby galleys, chains clanged, snapping taut. In that same breath, Valyrian cutters shot from the fog, ramming the exposed chain gaps. Obsidian-sheathed prows cleaved beams, splinters fountained. Shadow oil barrels released beneath water. Black tendrils rose, coiling around keels, rotting wood to pulp in heartbeats. Ships sagged, masts listing.
Eurones sailors rallied, fearing scorpions.
Iron bolts streaked, but banners of living shadow unfurled above unsullied shields, swallowing missile paths into dark mouths that closed with soft sighs. Viserion strafed starboard flanks, flame white as fever, igniting sailcloth. Screams tore the night. Regal of inland, torching siege camps lined against White Harbor's walls, sending tents and munitions into cascading bloom of green and red fire. The city bells finally clanged, frantic yet triumphant, woken to witness salvation by dragon. On Misericord's foredeck, Daenerys stood bareheaded in driving rain, cloak plastered to armor, hair whipping silver ribbons. She watched her navy weave through carnage, every maneuver a note in the symphony she had composed since Asshai. For each enemy hull ablaze, a freedman crew hauled survivors from water, cutting loose their slave collars if they wore them, offering iron or death. Many chose iron, shackles sunk to sea. Dawn broke over a battlefield reduced to flotsam and rising steam. Where Euron's 100 ships had menaced, barely a dozen remained afloat, limping south ablaze or crippled. Drogon perched upon a tilted war galley, wings mantled, his roar echoing over water like judgment. From its spar he shook melted chain links that dripped metal rain. White Harbor's gates yawned open. Sansa Stark rode forth on a gray mare, armor lacquered pale green, cloak of direwolf for billowing. Behind her marched shield maidens and bowmen in columns. She reined in at shore, eyes lifting to the Dragon Queen approaching in a skiff rowed by 4 unsullied. Sea breeze tangled their hair as Daenerys stepped onto wet sand. For a heartbeat no one spoke, 2 women measuring distances etched by rumor and fear. Then Sansa dismounted, boots sinking in surf, and knelt on one knee. "The North remembers," she said. "We remember chains too." She raised her head. "Welcome home." Daenerys extended a hand, lifted the young lady to her feet. Salt water lapped around their greaves, a baptism at the edge of collective fate. "Stand with me," Daenerys said. "Help me cleave the last fetter." Sansa's eyes, winter blue, held neither submission nor defiance, only resolve. "The North stands, but we fight for a realm, not an overlord. Break the throne, break the wheel, and rebuild with all houses free beneath law." "So sworn," Daenerys answered without hesitation. Her voice carried over waves. Soldiers on both sides exhaled as if some great hush released. Regal landed beyond the tide line, folding wings with crackling hiss. Steam rose from his scales. Children who had rushed from gates froze, yet curiosity overcame fear and they edged forward. One boy, hair ginger as autumn leaves, touched the dragon's talon with trembling hand. Regal snorted, nostrils flaring warm breath that ruffled the child's cloak. Laughter spilled from walls where grief used to nest. In the square beyond the harbor, councils formed. Northern captains plotting supply arcs, Valerian navigators charting safe channels, Shadowbinders and maesters debating how to store dragonfire for siege without raising half a city by accident. Amid charts and ciphers, Daenerys and Sansa sat together beneath a broken weirwood branch salvaged from winter storms. Red leaves pressed between oilcloth to dry. They spoke of Cersei's cruelty, of the faith militant arming peasant levies, of Tyrell survivors starving behind ruined Rose walls. But they also spoke of governance. How freedmen would be housed, how tithes might rebuild holds, how justice courts might replace execution blocks. Yora observed from a distance, shoulders settling. In Winterfell's battered watchtower, Brienne cleaned Oathkeeper with measured strokes, glancing often toward the harbor where dragons nested like living siege towers. Vaelus counseled Shadowbinders to temper zeal, for victory intoxicates faster than wine. Even if her smiled, lips curving in shadow before her face did. News of Euron's rout spread on gull wings. Clans in the Vale armed to descend upon King's Landing. Reach lords abandoned Cersei's cause to defend harvests from retaliatory burn. In the Iron Islands, priests of the drowned god questioned whether seawater alone still held power when dragons boiled it. Yet Cersei did not flinch. Ravens flew back reporting new scorpions forged, wildfire caches multiplied, prisoners strung on battlements as living shields. The Red Keep's walls glowed sickly green each night, a threat and a promise of pyre. Daenerys read each missive by candlelight that guttered in stone-rooted windows, smoke curling into frost-laced air. She traced Cersei's maneuvers on maps carved in wood, shifting pieces of driftwood shaped like ships, shards of obsidian shaped like armies, dragonbone talons shaped like dragons. Each move promised blood, and blood would come, but not yet. She ordered 3 days of rest, insisting each freedman eat warm bread, each shipwright mend masts, each dragon sleep sated. She walked snow-dusted quays at sunrise, cloaking her dragons with coarse wool blankets to shield sore joints. She drank spiced cider brewed by northern matrons, accepted compliments with shy nods. She visited sick tents, laid cool hands on fevered brows, ignoring cautions that a queen risked contagion. Healing was a language of power too. Children whispered tales that her hair was moonlight woven with fire. Elders recalled Aegon's sisters riding above these skies 300 years before. But this felt different. Not conquest by foreign wings, but deliverance carried by shadow and light entwined. Some feared the shadows, yes, yet feared chains more. On the eve before departure, snow began to fall. Fine crystals that melted on Regal's warm hide but lingered on Viserion's pale wings. Fires lit White Harbor's ramparts. Sailors sang a dirge of home left behind and home found anew. As Daenerys crossed the courtyard, she heard her name woven into verses, half prayer, half challenge. She paused beneath an arch, listening, until voices faded into wind. That night she dreamed of the Iron Throne again. But this time the barbs softened, melted into rivulets of quicksilver that flowed into a bowl cradled by unseen hands. The bowl reflected her face. Older, lines etched at eyes, yet peaceful. Children laughed somewhere beyond the mirror. When she woke, tears again stained her cheeks, but they tasted less of sorrow, more of ash turned fertile. Dawn revealed the fleet reborn. Valerion banners kissed northern wind beside Targaryen dragons, Stark direwolves, Tyrell roses stitched hurriedly onto sails salvaged from burned gardens, and even lesser-known symbols. A cracked will mended with gold, 3 cross chains snapped at centers, twin fish leaping over a rising sun. Each emblem told a story of bondage remembered and rejected. Daenerys mounted Drogon's saddle at harbor's mouth, armor gleaming black-red, helm crested by sculpted dragon wing. She glanced down to Sansa, who sat astride her mare, cloak furled tight. They exchanged a nod, no flourish, no speech. History already wrote itself in flame behind them. The fleet weighed anchor, prows turning south into biting wind. Snowflakes dissolved on warm deck planks. Dragons rose, circling, scattering gulls. Songs began, quiet at first, then swelling. A northern ballad braided with a Volantine cadence, overlaid by freedman work chant. 3 tongues, 1 rhythm. Daenerys closed her eyes against sun glare on water. She felt Drogon's muscles coil, the tremor before wing beat. She let it carry her breath, her fear, her yearning. And as he launched skyward, as the fleet fell small beneath, she whispered the words that had guided her from salt flats to Asshai, from shadow tunnels to these winter seas. Words that held no magic save will. Break the wheel. Wind answered beneath her wings, vast and cold and alive. Below, the armada surged like a living thing, each hull a scale upon the body of change. Above, dragons screamed, and the sky seemed to tear open just enough to let dawn spill through before its time. They flew south, toward Blackwater Bay, toward walls garrisoned by desperation and pride, toward a chair that cut all who sat upon it, toward an ending or a beginning written in smoke across the sky.